Hey folks, welcome back to the Mac and Mike Show. Mike and I, this past Tuesday or Wednesday, had a very interesting text message exchange. Um, we were talking about the nation of Israel, and I'm not even real sure how we got on that topic.
I don't know.
But I offered to Mike something along the lines of, why is Israel always right as far as our foreign policy goes? Something along those lines. It may have been slightly different. We have these conversations and these text message exchanges, and it oftentimes, after a couple of days, it gets lost a little bit in translation. But I think what I was trying to go for is that the United States of America and the nation of Israel are always allied. I can't remember a time, except maybe during the Obama and Biden administrations. The United States and Israel are pretty closely and tightly allied in all of the political and military events of the Middle East. And the question that I asked Mike, probably inarticulately, because I think we kind of got waylaid into some things with the Bible and some other things. Why is it that America always accepts Israel as being right? Now, I'm not talking about October 7th, because if you're familiar with what happened on October 7th, there's no excuse for that, there's no justification for that. That was horrible and evil and beyond the pale. And no nation should suffer that kind of abomination. If that abomination had occurred to the United States of America, we would have done greater damage to the enemy that did that to us than Israel did to Hamas. But what I am talking about is that so often when now I'm not talking about the college campuses where we're having protests today, that almost anti-Semitic across most of the intellectual institutions of the Northeast, maybe more across the country. But I mean from a government and a political perspective, almost all of our elected officials seem to be almost in lockstep with the ideas that Israel is espousing. And there was a thing on the internet that I saw, and I want to say it was Tucker Carlson and the senator from Texas, Ted Cruz. And Ted Cruz offered something along the lines of, in the Bible it says, I will bless those that bless Israel, meaning God would bless those nations or people that blessed Israel. And Ted Cruz was saying, I can't tell you where it is in the Bible, and Tucker Carlson spoke up right away. It says it's in Genesis. And, our elected official, I'm not from the state of Texas, so I can't really say Ted Cruz is my elected official, but you understand the context. A U.S. Senator from the great state of Texas was using the Bible to justify America's foreign policy when it relates to the nation of Israel. And I guess the question I was kind of asking Mike is that righteous? Is that fair? Should we take that position? Should the United States of America unilaterally support what Israel does? And I think we had several different points of contention or discussion about that. You want to jump in at this point and have at it?
Well, when the conversation first started, I think it was talking about the early days, whether or not the Arabs, Christians, and Jews all had a claim to the city of Jerusalem, not necessarily all of Israel.
Yes.
And I had brought up that, Jerusalem was part of Israel at the time, that it was given to, of course, King David conquered it, but it was based on Abraham. That's why we call it the Abraham Accords, trying to get the Middle East together, because Abraham had the two sons, Ishmael and Isaac. Isaac was to Sarah, and Ishmael was to Hagar, the servant woman. And two different sets of promises were made biblically.
Hagar was Egyptian, right?
Yeah, and she was a servant woman. Remember, Sarah laughed because she was so old she never thought she'd have a child.
Right.
So she was blessed with Isaac, and God had an agreement with Abraham that he also passed down to Isaac, that he was going to give them the lands of Canaan, the Canaanites, and they had, of course, to take out the Philistines and others, and that happened under King David about, 1000 BC or so. And from there, it's been a mess ever since, because while they reigned, that there was an exile, there was a return, and during that time there was a vacuum that was sort of filled by non-Jewish people. Those who were the descendants of Ishmael, many of them Arabs, but not all, sort of laid claim to that particular area. Move it up to the time of Christ, then, we have the first Christians being Jewish, and Jerusalem at that time was initially the center of Christendom because that's where Jesus was from. And then we had Muhammad come onto the scene. Now, just for a little historic sake, the way Muhammad gets involved, because remember, their holy city's Mecca, and I've been there.
Medina,
But Mecca is where the
main one. Yeah.
asteroid belt, or the asteroid fell, the black rock.
Obelisk, whatever they call it. Yeah.
That's where they have the Hajj. So somehow in their mythology, Muhammad was translated by night magically to Jerusalem, where he was caught up into the heavens, and they considered Jerusalem then their holy place. Now, from what I understand, and this is just what the teachers told me when I was in Bible college and other things, that Muhammad was trying to unify the Christian, Jewish, and Arabic nations who had all these different foreign gods into one particular thing. So, of course, he had to do that by brute strength and military means, because nobody is giving up their long-held cultural and religious beliefs on some guy's say-so. So they had to use the sword. And we all know the story after that, after Rome and Muhammad, and then the holy wars between the European kings, and it was a terrible, terrible mess. So who really, I guess if you're a Christian like Ted Cruz and you and I, we have an empathy or a sympathy for Israel because they were God's chosen people, and out of God's chosen people, we have the covenant with Jesus Christ, which we are grafted into the tree, as the Bible says. But now, remember, until 1940 whatever,
49.
After the second
47 they voted, and 49 they actually did it. They created Israel.
Recreated Israel as a nation. But again, there was that 2,000 almost year, not quite 2,000 year vacuum where Jews always occupied Jerusalem, even when others conquered it.
Right.
But they were suppressed in their own land. And eventually, as you pointed out, Menachem Begin, this is something that Mac could talk more at length about, prior to getting their independence after the Second World War, would have been considered a terrorist by today's standards.
And there were several Jewish organizations, 2 or 3, 4 or 5, that were much like Hamas today.
Yeah, and that's where Zionism comes from. And if you want to talk a little bit more about that, I think the audience would be kind of interested in that.
Well, I want to interject first. The way we got started about this whole, I said, is Israel truly belong to the Jews? And you said in the Bible it says that Jerusalem belongs to the Jews.
Well, Israel, the land of Canaan.
And so when we were talking about Jerusalem, I said, well, Abraham was given a covenant by God, and he was impatient. He was supposed to have a son. He was a little bit impatient. Sarah was too. Mm-hmm. And finally, Sarah convinced Abraham to lie with Hagar, and his first son was Ishmael. But that was not the son that God promised him.
Right.
Because after that, Sarah, even in her advanced age, did have a son, which they named Isaac. And of course, Isaac was the one that Abraham was going to sacrifice. And when God realized that Isaac was such a faithful servant that he was willing to sacrifice the son that God had promised him, he made the covenant with Abraham, and that his descendants would be as great a number as the grains of sand and the stars in the sky. And I put forth to you the hypothesis that maybe that same promise, that covenant with Abraham, existed not only to Isaac and his descendants, but to Ishmael and his descendants, and you corrected me on that. Different promises made to Ishmael, right?
Yes.
But as part of our conversation, we got to the point where we said, we know that Israel itself, the forming of Israel was acquiesced primarily by the British, although the first nation to recognize the state of Israel was the United States. What the Zionist terrorist, I mean, they killed people, they blew up hotels, they attacked British military installations. They did all of these kinds of things to convince Britain to get out of their way and let them have their country back. And so I find it just a tad ironic, maybe a little bit unfortunate. People don't remember the Palestinian terrorists of today are not all that dissimilar from the Zionist terrorists of the late 1940s. So I guess what I'm saying is that there's a common thread of this whole idea of terror. Not that the terrorism in the 1940s was anywhere near as horrible and terrible as what happened on October 7th. But I guess when you brought up Jerusalem, you said Jerusalem, part of Canaan, however you couched it, belongs to the Jews. And my comment back to you was, yet Jerusalem is a holy city to three major religions: to the Christians because of Jesus Christ, to the Muslims because of the story of Muhammad, and also to the Jews because of their ancestors. And what you have to accept is that before the Jews were in Jerusalem, there were people who were not Jewish in that area as well. It was not always the nation of Israel.
Jebusites.
And then after the Romans dispersed the nation of Israel because they were too much trouble.
Yeah.
By the way, they were terrorists back then too. They were causing all kind of trouble for the Romans. So they dispersed the Jews all over the world. So there was that gap between the Romans and 1949 where there was no nation of Israel. There just simply wasn't. And Britain, because of its conquest of the sun never sets on the British Empire. I could say that with a British accent, although you wouldn't be able to understand it. The sun never sets on the British. No. But at any rate, what Menachem Begin and other terrorist Zionist groups of the day did is they forced Britain to tuck their tail between their legs and make some artificial lines and geographic lines and get the heck out of Dodge, And that was arguably the beginning of the... but why is it, and I think this question still deserves an answer, why is it that the United States always takes the side of Israel in these many and various disagreements? Now, you could say they don't always, but I can't think of a time when they didn't. And I'm not discounting the fact that the Arab nations, the Muslim nations that surround Israel, represent a much greater geography and population than the nation of Israel. And if they go to war, you'd think that the Israelis should be outmanned, outclassed, and defeated. Yet every time they've had a war, Israel's won.
Yeah. 6-Day War.
And others.
Yeah.
The Golan Heights they took during the 6-Day War, they refused to give it back. So if you understand from a military perspective, artillery pieces in the Golan Heights and that, rockets, that covers everything, So they couldn't give it back and still have safety and security. So the question still, Mike, why do so many people in the United States go, throughout our history, there has been some very tenuous times with the nation of Israel. I mean, they've spied on our nation. They've put illegal surveillance on our Congress people, on our elected officials in various states and in D.C. Does an ally do that to somebody who gives them billions of dollars a year in economic and military aid? Does an ally are they supposed to behave that way?
Well, that's a different question. The shameful truth of it is, if you look into this, every allied nation spies on their allies. Great Britain does it to us, the French, the Germans, we do it to them. And a lot of people are pretty naive to sit here and think that we aren't involved in this. And, you can remember even President Obama was highly criticized for being so heavily involved in the Israeli elections. That was uncovered. He was
Sure. He tried to make sure Bibi Netanyahu did not get elected.
right. So and they had we have a frenemies, I guess, relationship. I mean, most of the time we're friends, but there's always the potential to be in disagreement. Like look at Trump with being in disagreement with Spain over the amount of money they're giving to NATO, and we had our problems with Germany and a lot of other countries not ponying up the amount of money they were supposed to. So that's sort of like we're not going to go to war with each other. It's just like how deep does our friendship go is the question. So with Israel, I think one of the main things, there's probably multifaceted reasons, they are essentially a Western style government and culture.
They are.
There is no other country within that region.
Democracy. You might say they're a democracy. Maybe not exactly like our republic, but they are a democratic government.
Yeah. The others are, not that way.
Some are monarchies. Some are, run by religious leaders.
Combinations of parliaments and kings and informal presidents. But, and a lot of it's through their own religion when it comes to Islam. But Israel doesn't require, any kind of religious test. But typically it's going to be a Jewish person. So anyway, their culture, they do a lot of great things. They're an inventive, ingenious people. They've always had to be very self-reliant because during the times of Christianity overtaking Europe, the Jews were persecuted back then. They were not allowed to own property. So that's where they got the old, they're greedy money grubbers, but money was the only thing they could have. They couldn't own land. They couldn't own property. And of course, that drove a certain amount of ingeniousness into them. They didn't have to worry about the trappings of land and everything. They could focus on things that were different. And that's why I said, it's like BASF, the old television commercial. We don't make the product, we make the product better. You think about all the aid we've given them. Our F-16s alone. We give it to them, they tear out our redundant systems, and they put in stuff to make it lighter, faster, smarter, and can carry more weapons. They're just an absolutely incredibly ingenious people.
Oh, hey, that thing with the pagers that they did.
Yeah.
A couple of years planning before they were able to. But Mike, I imagine because of the being surrounded by enemies, they must take their safety and security to a very high level. But I guess what I was saying is that the United States of America, through the billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of aid that, nobody gives aid to the United States.
Right.
So when you say that we're spying on other people, we're not taking their money and then spying on them, okay? What I'm saying is that Israel wouldn't exist without the protection of the United States of America. They simply wouldn't exist, okay?
Yeah.
And yet they have the audacity to spy on us. Now, having said that, what I just said a few moments ago, maybe they're spying on us because they're not real sure that we're going to continue being sugar daddy and be completely, supportive of them, and they need to know that early on if that's going to happen. Their very survival depends on that. So maybe that's why they're spying on us. I don't know.
Yeah, the U.S. is very fickle. I mean, every 4 to 8 years, our president changes, our Congress changes every 2, Senate every 6, and in a fold over pattern, and you just never know where we're going to be on foreign policy. So I don't blame them for wanting to figure that out in advance.
It's almost bipolar in a way,
Yeah.
Schizophrenic. But I don't always believe that the decisions made by the nation of Israel are the righteous ones. I understand that those decisions are always in the best interest of Israel. But should America always support what in the best interest of Israel. Do you understand? It's a very narrow kind of thread I'm trying to pull through this thing.
Right.
But, you know, Donald Trump goes around saying, make America great again. And the whole point of his Make America Great Again is put America first. I believe in that, you know. I do believe that, you know, with great wealth comes great responsibility, and I think the nation of America has a great responsibility to the world. But by the same token, something my dad taught me when I was knee-high to a jaybird, take care of yourself first. Mm-hmm. If you're not okay, you can't help anybody else.
True.
And the point I'm trying to get to here is that when Israel does something, the United States almost always concurs. Now that's a little bit different recently. You might remember, you know, President Trump being quoted on television and saying, "Hey, look, these two countries have been at war and they both don't know what the hell they're doing."
Yeah.
Although he said it in a little bit more colorful way.
Right.
And similarly, during the Obama administration, they gave the nation of Iran virtually everything Iran wanted, right? Mm-hmm. Remember, they got rid of the sanctions. Remember the pallet loads of cash that they dropped off on the C-130 or whatever it was, the cargo plane that they flew over there. Hell, as much money, it might have been a C-5 Galaxy. I don't remember how big the plane was, but I know there were a lot of cash and piled up and held down with shrink wrap. So therein lies a schizophrenic part of our diplomatic or foreign policy, right? First we're supporting Iran, then we're supporting Israel. But the point I'm trying to get to, Mike, is what debt does America owe Israel, if any, and how should Israel react to the largesse and the great amount of defense that the United States of America provides for Israel? First, I guess what I'm really saying is Israel taking the United States for granted? And is the United States being too easy when it comes to Israel? And secondly, should we behave that way? People who don't have the Bible or the Quran, they don't know that Jerusalem is special. You know, if you're a Buddhist or or whatever,
Hindu or
Jerusalem doesn't have special meaning to you.
right.
Should you care? I'm sure they don't. But we in the United States almost reflexively defend whatever Israel does. And I think that in a world today that we have so many problems and so many advances, right? What is AI going to mean to world peace? So I guess ultimately what I'm saying is that does America have the appropriate and correct foreign policy when it comes to the Middle East?
It depends, and it's going to change dynamically. So, okay, stop and think about this. The Abraham Accords. We're starting to get these former enemies to realize that they can all prosper if they just have peace, because war doesn't do much to stimulate your economy when you don't have an economy that relies on making bullets and beams.
Manufacturing, yeah.
You know, because that's what drives a good economy, but not there. So it's in all of their best interest to cooperate. Now, here's the question: the future. What happens when all these countries, if they ever do, come to a peace where they build a coalition of cooperation? They can become a powerhouse like the European Union or better. And what will that mean to our involvement? Do we want to be hopefully allied with that power, or do we want to be seen as not allied? But now here's where things changed. During the Gulf War, I mean, we didn't have bases in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. We used some British bases in the islands around the various oceans, the Indian Ocean. But, you know, we didn't even have that kind of infrastructure. But now
we do now.
We do now. You know, we're even in Iraq and Syria and other places. At least, you know, we pulled out of some, but we could reoccupy those areas quickly. And it used to be that Israel was just a foothold, just in case we couldn't get the cooperation from these other nations. But what happens dynamically in the future is my question. If we get
Well,
the cooperation of everybody, now probably, I don't know about Iran, I don't think that's anytime soon, but they're Persians, not Arabs, and so they have sort of a different cultural view there.
Well, the future is different today than it was 2 months ago.
Oh yeah.
Once Israel started the war with Iran, and they now hold air superiority, and they have basically eliminated the ground-based air defense system that Iran has. Iran is basically a paper tiger. But the thing you have to understand is that Iran was rushing headlong towards creating a nuclear weapon. There's multiple reasons why that's a bad thing. One, if they did achieve a nuclear weapon, there's no doubt in my mind that they would have used a nuclear weapon, not in the conventional ICBM kind of thing, but in a dirty bomb in a suitcase kind of thing, where they would have tried to attack Israel and the United States with nuclear weapons. No doubt in my mind. They tell us every day that
Israel, death to America. Yeah.
Israel is Satan and America is the great Satan.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but what happened to the rest of the Middle East while Iran was racing towards a nuclear weapon? Countries like Saudi Arabia, and they have a natural dislike of one another. It has to do with the Sunni versus Shia religion. But what did the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia say as Iran was rushing towards a nuclear weapon? He said very clearly, if Iran has a nuclear weapon, Saudi Arabia will have nuclear weapons as well. And there's countries like Pakistan and North Korea and others who would gleefully and happily turn over nuclear weapons to these countries for cash. And the one thing the Middle East has a lot of is oil cash, right? Cash for oil. So we could have had a rampant and brand new nuclear arms race in the Middle East, which would have been bad for everybody. So on one hand, the bunker buster bombs that Donald Trump utilized along with our Air Force and B-2s to take out the uranium enrichment facility in Iran, even if we didn't have a clear and present danger, as far as it did absolutely settle some of the consternation from the other nations of the Middle East. And oh, by the way, probably enhanced the likelihood that the Abraham Accords that you were talking about are going to be more universally implemented, accepted, approved and enacted. Yeah. So that should be a good thing for peace in the Middle East. Because it's a funny thing about economic ties. They oftentimes have a great deal of sway towards any political or military ties as well. Money has a way of doing that to people.
Sure.
So where are we today? Again, the question that hangs in the air, Mike, I don't think either you or I answered, is it righteous for the United States of America to always and every time accept the Israeli position on a regional disagreement?
No, but it has to be taken on a case-by-case situation. Like, all right, we admitted that Israel got off to a rough start using terroristic tactics under Menachem Begin, and they were roundly criticized for it. Great Britain did, of course, but the League of Nations didn't, and the UN wasn't formed yet. And, so the whole world didn't come together and condemn them, but there was enough condemnation that Menachem Begin's tactics changed, and they started going after military targets instead of hotels and things. So they sort of legitimized the targeting. And today, you got to ask yourself the question. I mean, Israel does more, and we used to do this here in America when we were in the Gulf War. We dropped leaflets, we dropped radios to people.
Yep.
We told them before we were going to bomb them. And we said, get out of here, or we're going to end up killing you. I could go into that for a long time, and I won't, because that was kind of what we did. But Israel's very good about sending these warnings, hey, we're coming to get these guys. If you're a civilian, get away. They even did it in Iran. They said if you're near a military facility or any kind of facility that might be harboring nuclear, not just weapons, but nuclear fuel, evacuate the area, stay out. Even President Trump said, just get the hell out of Tehran, evacuate the whole city. So, no other country in the world that I know of, besides the United States and Israel, gives that kind of warning. Now, our European allies haven't been in charge individually of a particular combat operation where it was solely them. They were usually there with us anyway. So we were setting the tone and the tempo. Anyhow, again, so they've lived more or less down. You can't hold Israel accountable for what Menachem Begin and his cronies initially did. We can recognize it.
Yet we're holding Hamas responsible for what they did on
But they're
October
continuing
7th.
it. See, that's the problem. See, they're continuing to kill innocent civilians. See, Menachem Begin learned after the criticisms started coming in, hey,
That's a fair point.
So when you don't learn your lesson, what are you going to do? So, I mean, how long ago was Menachem Begin doing this? We're talking about 75, 80 years. So the Hamas and these other groups, Hezbollah, etc., have been practicing this on Israel ever since it was formed. They kill civilians, and there's no warning. I think I've yet to see the decision that Israel made that I wouldn't personally support as a U.S. citizen. Like, they went to war with Iran. We should have done it, but we didn't want to do it.
Don't forget what they did in the West Bank, in Gaza Strip. They basically leveled that whole community.
Yeah, but they asked for it. I'm sorry.
I understand. I understand. I just wish there were some way to attack the people who did the evil without the collateral damage of so many civilians.
Okay, just here's one point. Over 70% of Palestinians in the Gaza Bank support Hamas and killing everyone in Israel. Over 70%. So now there is that 30% or 25% that doesn't, at least hate Israel as vehemently as to want to kill it. May still hate them, but they just don't want to kill them. What do you do with a country where the vast majority of the people hate you, and and they don't wear uniforms? They have uniforms, but they don't wear them when they're fighting, because they want to be able to say, "Oh, you killed all these civilians," and they hide in hospitals and mosques and
do you remember the
camps.
good old days when the Palestinian Liberation, or PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, ran?
Arafat?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yasser Arafat. He was what? He was there for, I don't know, for one term, 4 years, 8 years, something like that, and then Hamas was voted in. And a lot of times Hamas got the votes by threatening people's lives. So, I mean, it wasn't, but people don't understand. Like, when you and I were kids, we used to watch Saturday morning cartoons, right? Bugs Bunny and Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner and that kind of stuff. These young kids, they see pictures of Jews depicted as monkeys and pigs being killed by the good guy who is the Muslim superhero.
Right.
So they're inculcated
from the time they're babes
with a hatred of Jews from the beginning of their lives. So that's a problem as well. I don't know the answer, Mike. I just so often like Ted Cruz being somewhat caught up with his foot in his mouth when he said, "Those nations that bless Israel will be blessed," and Tucker quietly fed back to him the facts. That was Genesis, that was Old Testament. Does what's written in the Bible mean that we should always agree with the government of Israel? Because our government lies to us, Mike.
Yeah.
I mean, our government lies to us every day. I didn't used to believe that, but it's just a fact, right? I mean, 8 weeks ago, Pam Bondi said, "Hey, the Epstein file's on my desk. We're going to release it all." What did you see released?
Nothing. Yeah.
So maybe that's not a lie of maybe that's not error of commission, but the point is that they promised us that. They promised us all kinds of things and now they're not delivering on. And I think that's a problem. I think that Americans want to believe their government, and I think the Americans want to believe that the government of America is looking out for us first. And I'm not sure. And I'm not an Israel hater. I'm not an anti. I'm not anti-Semitic. I just don't believe that Israel is always right. And I think America is too quick to agree with Israel and take Israel's side of the argument in all cases. Uh, Maybe that's changing now with some of the involvement with the Saudi Arabians. I don't know. I look at this and I look historically, and I understand the pressure that the nation of Israel is faced with, being surrounded by larger, more populous neighbors who are enemies of theirs. And I also understand that without the United States of America, probably Israel would have ceased to exist already because of the support and the aid and the weapons we give them, the training, the support. People don't always know that when those bombs come raining down, oftentimes it's our satellite targeting systems that are giving the precise locations of those. So, I mean, it's not, I'm not saying that I have a problem with it. I say that it's very interesting to me and a little bit worrisome that we don't always consider all sides of the argument before accepting that Israel is correct.
Well, that's true in any conflict, whether it's Ukraine and Russia or Pakistan and India, et cetera, et cetera. You have to understand what's behind the arguments on either side. Now, the question I have is, well, what you said is, like you said, you gave a generality, and you're saying is all generalities are false, including this one. The question I have is, what policy can you cite that Israel enacted or did that you say America shouldn't support? Is there one, or is it just a general feeling that we can all agree to that no, you never give anyone carte blanche? You just shouldn't do that.
Well, what did President Trump say to the Ayatollah in Iran? He said, you can't have a nuclear weapon. I'm going to give you 60 days, and we're going to have some agreement within that 60-day period as to how we're going to move forward. And the Ayatollah thought that America was bluffing because Biden was bluffed all the time, and Obama bluffed all. Remember when Obama put the line in the sand, and then they stepped over the line, and he just stepped back twice? Yeah. He didn't do anything about it. No. When George H.W. Bush put a line in the sand, they crossed the line, he kicked ass, right? What is that Toby Keith said? We put a boot in your ass, it's the American way. Well, that's what Trump did. Now, what happened on day 61 after the 60-day notice?
Right. Israel invaded, started bombing.
Yes. First they took out the air defense system. Then they started taking out all of the Iranian, what are the IRG? Iran Revolutionary Guard, or whatever it stood for. And then they went after the military sites. Then they went after all the airplanes. I mean, they eviscerated Iran's ability to prosecute a war. Mm-hmm. There was no war declared. Do you remember a war being declared?
No.
Do you remember somebody saying to the UN, hey, we're going to bomb Iran. Is that all right with you guys? No, Israel just did it. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, do you suppose they did that all on their own? Or do you suppose they had tacit approval from the United States of America?
Oh, definitely.
They didn't put a aircraft in the air until the United States of America said, okay, we'll look this way while you're doing it.
Yeah, give us plausible deniability and go do what you got to do.
When you say what initiative did Israel take that was questionable, would you consider the annihilation of their war-making abilities to be a questionable decision with or without the tacit approval of the United States of America?
No, I don't have a problem with that. I mean,
they weren't in a state of war.
No, but you don't.
Do you think that Israel's attack on Iran was similar to Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor?
No.
Why not?
Well, we could spend another hour getting into the history, but okay, Iran, as you pointed out, every day they chant death to Israel, death to America.
And at some point, they sent rockets, and their terrorist affiliates, they sent rockets nearly every day.
Right.
But did a state of war exist between Israel and Iran before they?
Okay, stop. When was the last time America declared war? We didn't. We called it Authorization for Military Force, AUMF. We haven't declared a war since World War II. So nobody declares war anymore because you just can't do it, because then you give away the element of surprise, right? And that's how you defeat the enemy.
I'm not saying I disagree with what Israel did. We
Okay.
know that Iran was a bad actor. What I'm saying is, in direct response to your question,
Yes.
what initiative did they take that you find questionable?
Yeah.
And all I'm saying is that I'm not completely convinced that the Israeli actions to implement a war against Iran in the fashion that they did was the proper and righteous decision.
You and I are going to completely disagree.
Okay, and that's all right. We've disagreed before.
Yeah.
That's not uncommon. But again, it's a very complex set of circumstances. Iran, many people believe, planned and coordinated the October 7th attacks through proxies in Hamas.
Right. I wouldn't have done it without approval.
So, from that perspective, you could say that Iran attacked Israel. And worse than attacking Israel, they attacked the civilian population in
Yes.
the most heinous and vulgar of ways. And Israel wanted its pound of flesh in exchange. But if you look at nations at war, Israel never declared war on Iran. Now, I understand what you say, lack of surprise and all that. Israel would never have done that if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were president.
Well, that's
Simply
true.
would not have done it.
Yeah, true.
America would not have given tacit approval,
Right.
would not have looked the other way.
Correct.
Now, you have to believe without question that the actions of the Israeli Air Force and the Israeli military was justified in their attacks against the sovereign nation of Iran. Because I'll tell you how it looks from the Iran perspective. From the Iran perspective, it looks like they were attacked without warning and inappropriately.
From the civilian population, yes.
Sure.
That's how it is. But the Ayatollahs and the IRGC, they understand that they've been using these proxies against Israel. How long do you... So let's say Russia or China started to become friends with Canada and Mexico and started just lobbing missiles into the United States, not aiming at, military targets, just lob in a couple hundred missiles, wait for a couple hundred bombs to come back, and this went on and on. And it just got so freaking annoying. Well, Israel first went in and took care of Hamas.
It was far more than annoying, Mike.
Yeah.
People died.
People died, right?
Lots of people died.
I'm toning it down for the observational, the big picture. So how long would you put up with Mexico and Canada doing? Well, that's essentially what Israel did. They first went after Hamas, and then they went after Hezbollah, and I guess they started hitting the Houthis, which are now acting up again. And after this has been going on for how long? I mean, people, we think about October 7th, you got to go back like a couple dozen years. It's
Look, the
more.
fight, the bad blood between Israel and the Muslim nations goes back centuries.
Yeah, but it got worse after the guy in Iran, the Shah of Iran, was deposed and the Ayatollah took over, because
1979.
that's when they started funding the proxies around Israel. Before that, it was just the 6-Day War type stuff: Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon.
Prior to 1979, Iran was the most westernized nation in the Middle East.
That's why Trump says, make Iran great again. He sees a potential future because, look, the Persian people are great people. They're industrious. They're smart. It's their leaders that just suck.
Yeah.
Because they are so filled with vitriol and hatred. And so, anyway, I am surprised Israel didn't do this when Trump was president the last time.
Well, but the point is that they couldn't have done it under Democratic administrations.
No.
Because the Democratic administrations were supporting Iran.
Mm-hmm.
Either tacitly or implicitly,
Right.
they were supporting Iran, and that created some very, very difficult times in the Middle East. But from that support of Iran, that's what put Saudi Arabia and Jordan and other nations of the like in that looking to purchase. See, because that's the thing.
Yeah.
Iran was making their own nuclear weapons,
Mhm.
but these very oil-rich nations can purchase nuclear weapons from countries who would willingly and glad. North Korea will give its next-born first child for money. They're
Yeah.
so poor they'll. So yeah, they would absolutely sell nuclear weapons to the highest bidder. Therein lies the dichotomy, the problem that existed. If Iran was intent on getting nuclear weapons, not only was it a danger to Israel and the United States, but there's also the danger of nuclear escalation within the whole entire region.
Absolutely.
So what Israel did could probably be justified by the fact that the United States of America's national interest lied in those nations not becoming nuclear nations, and we allowed Israel to take the blame and to conduct the actions. I think it's very interesting, and I don't know whether it was a technical ability or whether it was our unwillingness to give them the bunker buster bombs technology and the B-2 bomber technology. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we can't do that. We got to keep that ours.
Yeah. So whatever the decision was, you notice that once Israel gained air superiority and there was no aircraft, there was no ground launching sites capable of attacking our aircraft, that's when the United States of America went there and destroyed their nuclear facilities. But again, is Israel always right, Mike? See, that's
Well, I can't. I'm waiting. I mean, you say that, and then I'd have to go do more research on all the actions that Israel has done for the last 80 some years and say, okay, well, they weren't right here. But I can't think of anything off the top of my head. But then again, it's not my area of expertise. So
I guess what I'm saying, Mike, is that I want the governments and the elected officials, and when I say governments, I mean state, local, national governments in the United States of America, to consider the needs of America first. I don't
Sure.
mean I don't want to help other nations. I don't mean that I don't want to help other countries who are in need. I do. Americans and the American people, by and large, are the most generous, charitable people in the world.
Mhm.
So I want our elected officials and our government, all of them, to put our state and our national interest before other nations. After that, we can help others. And right now, I have a suspicion that in some ways, the needs of Israel are placed before the needs of America. And I'm against that. Not that I'm anti Semitic, not that I hate Israel, but I believe that sometimes the needs of Israel are put ahead of ours. You talked about the Ukraine. Do you know we're running out of 155 millimeter artillery shells? We can't make them fast enough because as soon as we make them, we ship them to Ukraine. I got news for you. The war in Ukraine, it was lost 2 years ago. There's no way Ukraine is going to beat Russia in that war. There's no way. It's not unless America gets directly involved. Ukraine will never beat Russia on the battlefield.
Yeah.
Never.
Well,
Not ever. Not in our lifetime.
What about bringing it to a stalemate that goes on for 20 some years?
Like Korea, maybe.
Like Korea, like Afghanistan.
And I guess if they got enough support from the European Union, Germany and France and all the other European nations, I maybe there's a way that they could stand up to Putin and to the Russian war machine. But I'm going to say again, there's no way the nation of Ukraine can defeat the army of Russia. And if people are telling us we're winning over there, they're lying, and I don't know why they're lying. And again, what is our national interest in Ukraine?
Well, now we have rare earth minerals. That's our national interest.
Well, but what is really our, other than the fact that we want to preserve Israel, what's our national interest there? At one time, our national interest was we need the oil.
Mm-hmm.
America is the largest producer of oil in the world.
Yeah.
We don't need their oil anymore, Mike.
No, but the world oil market is it's a world market. So a deficit in the Middle East causes prices to rise, which affects America, our industrial base, our consumer base. There is
rising prices of oil benefits Russia more than anyone.
well, yeah,
Because
right now. But
who was it?
it's
Was
gonna-
it McCain who said Russia is a gas station with
nuclear bombs?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's why we still have a vested interest in the worldwide free flow of oil, and
Do you know that China gets more than 40% of their oil through the Strait of Hormuz?
yeah, that's why they're not going to shut it down. That's why the Houthis are messing around in the Red Sea only, and they're only going after ships that do business or have docked or docking at
Didn't
Israel.
the Houthis just sink a ship?
Yeah, it's because it once visited Israel port, so anything that's ever visited Israel is now considered fair target.
Well, I guess we better wrap this up, Mike. I still don't have an answer to my question. Should America always take Israel's side in all events, or should we utilize America First principles before we back Israel and all the things that they do? And I think that maybe with the Abraham Accords, that the United States of America will be more interested in listening to other voices in the Middle East, because we'll want to, we'll not only want to establish the Abraham Accords among all those nations, but also support them in their infancy until they get strong enough bonds to stand on their own.
Right.
But Israel, despite the fact that most often I support them, they don't have clean hands, Mike.
No.
From the inception of the country to the many and various times in which they spied on our nation, and the many and various times when our nation put their national interest ahead of ours. I think that we, as the United States of America, once upon a time when we were the richest nation in the world and we didn't have a $37 trillion deficit, we could afford largesse of accepting other nations' needs and best interest before ours. I don't think we can do that anymore. And I think the United States of America truly has to get back to America first and all that means.
Well, I don't disagree with America First, and I won't get us started on America's early history and how we were considered terrorists by the British. But all nations have these rocky starts. It's where we are today that we have to focus on, and that's my thought. We'll see as it goes into the future. There may be a day when Israel does something and I'll say, no, I don't approve of that, or I don't think it's in America's interest. But thus far, I just don't know enough. I can't think anything off the top of my head, but maybe there's something out there.
Yeah. I guess we should end this up, Mike.
All right,
Mac and Mike,
out.
out.